I think amnesty for one, amnesty for all. And they're dividing up these 4,700 pilots into 4 buckets. And first 2 buckets, less than 70% disabled. Hack, it's early November 2023, and if you're a U.S. pilot as well as a U.S. military veteran receiving VA disability benefits and didn't claim that on your MedXpress for the FAA, they're after you. And you likely received one of these scary letters. Well, a lot of my friends have been reaching out to me going, hey, what gives? What are they going to do to me? What's the retribution? Is there amnesty? I got an answer to all those questions direct from the FAA. So let's get into it. Hey, it's Steve. Welcome back to Clear Direct. All right, this is a very serious episode since clearly there are going to be some people who may never fly again due to the loss of their medical and some retribution from the FAA and potentially fighting the FAA in court. So I'm going to stray from my usual light, fun aviation, building an airplane related topic to get real serious about this. So background on me, I flew F-15s for 21 years, retired active duty from the Air Force 3 years ago. I fly for a major airline and I am receiving VA disability benefits. That's about all I'm going to get into on myself. I think you guys can understand that. I've read other forums on this topic, and in the discussion it can get pretty heated from the people who never served saying, how dare you take disability benefits if you don't actually earn them. Well, I'm here to say, one is keep the comments section respectful. If you're not inquisitive or supportive, I have an itchy trigger finger to delete those comments, okay? So be warned. Number 2 is you need to know that every veteran goes through transition assistance training. TAPS is what they called it for me at Travis Air Force Base a few years ago. And there are veteran reps that come out there and are shaking trees for every sort of ache and pain that military veterans have because of their service, and said, if you can prove it, you need to go and get that disability benefit. Okay, so they are rah, rah, rah cheering for you to get every cent that you earned. And I'm here to agree with that, but I think they need to obviously caveat that with, if you're a commercial driver or airline pilot or aspire to be, you need to be very, very careful. If you're in that bucket thinking about getting out of the Air Force or Navy or Army or Marines or Coast Guard, thank you for your service, but watch the end of this video to see how to make sure and keep yourself out of trouble with the FAA. I did talk to the FAA for an hour and a half, a representative who was very gracious with his time. I've found that the FAA as a whole, bureaucracy is big and scary, but individuals in the FAA can be really, really awesome. And so I thank him for his input. And I also thought about bringing him onto this episode and having a forum. He's willing to do it. I have a couple of other social media influencers that are schooled in mental health awareness. There seems to be a lot of that, and this will spur some issues. So make sure you're subscribed, because there will be a part 2, depending on if there's a lot of interaction with this video and if it's well received and people are getting a lot out of it and have more questions to follow up. I will bring other people that will help me answer those questions. But I need you guys to get this information ASAP. So I'm going to stop blabbering and just get into the data. The IG identified approximately 4,700 cases where veterans allegedly provided fraudulently, intentionally false or incorrect statements on applications for airman medical certifications regarding the receipt of VA disability benefits and underlying medical conditions for which they are receiving such benefits. Okay, so action here. There's 4 major paragraphs here, and they're dividing up these 4,700 pilots into 4 buckets. First 2 buckets, less than 70% disabled, right? So 60, 50, 40, 30, 10, 0 disability. If you're receiving compensation, if you're not receiving the actual money, right, if you're below 50%, but it's an offset, you're still receiving compensation for disability. The other last 2 buckets, which we'll get to in a second, are 70 and higher. All right, so just talking to the folks who are less than 70% disabled according to the VA disability rating. Okay, the delineation for these first 2 buckets, you're both below 70%, but whether or not you have a disqualifying condition under basic med, and I'll link all those conditions below. If you are one of those people that do not have a disqualifying condition, this is the easiest bucket, right? So you're 60% disabled or less and you don't have a disqualifying, regardless of how long you haven't clicked on that box in MedXpress, you have an opportunity to reconcile your medical records by submitting a new application for Airman Medical Certification and scheduling an appointment with your AME within specific and expedited timeframes depending on the class of medical certificate. You must provide complete and truthful information regarding the receipt of VA disability benefits and underlying medical conditions for which you are receiving the disability benefits in connection with the new application. Okay, here's where we delineate the class of medical. First class airman medical certificate holders must have completed these requirements. So essentially like ASAP, there's no time frame for it. Now, second and third class airman medical certificate holders must complete these requirements before their current medical certificate expires or no later than January 31st, 2024, whichever is earlier. There's nothing disqualifying, but you still have to talk about each of these conditions with your AME. Okay, you're probably guessing what this bucket 2 is. Again, you're less than 70% disabled, but now you do have a disqualifying condition. It doesn't break it down into first, second, or third class medical. It just says that you've got an opportunity to rectify the situation and you're gonna get a letter. You've got to comply within 60 days from the date of the letter. What I have heard is that if it's close, if you haven't done anything and it's 65 days, they're going to be a little bit lenient there, but you need to get after it. You don't have to have it all rectified. Because you've got disqualifying conditions, right? You are probably going to be grounded. Okay, so what's a disqualifying condition? Sleep apnea. If you've got sleep apnea, and you're receiving 50% disability from the VA, then you're gonna have to go get that rectified and you're probably gonna be grounded for a period of time. So it behooves you to kind of get this going. I don't know if loss of license or loss of medical insurance is gonna come in through this, so you can weigh in on the comments, or that could be a question for part 2 on this. Moving on to the second 2, a little bit more serious, right? And the main delineator here of these next 2 is that you have a 70% disability rating or greater. The delineator between buckets 3 and 4 is how long you've been less than truthful with the FAA on MedXpress. If you have a disability rating of 70% or higher and who have not submitted multiple applications for a first or second class medical certificate, or submitted an application after receiving the 70% rating, you may be eligible to reconcile your medical records by submitting a new application for airman medical certification and scheduling an appointment with an AME. Okay, there's no timeline here unless you potentially got one on your letter. AAM will evaluate these cases on a case-by-case basis. AAM will exercise its discretion to determine whether to issue one of the letters referenced in action, paragraphs 1 or 2 above, or send the case to AGC 300 for evaluation, right? That's essentially the general counsel, the lawyers for the FAA, and if appropriate, initiation of legal enforcement. Okay, sounds scary. I believe that they're not going to go after you if you have not submitted multiple applications for a first or second class medical certificate and not being truthful about getting VA disability. All right, so this is just applicable to the folks 70% or higher. What I don't see here is folks under basic med or third class medical. So for number 4, here's the tough one. Okay, and if you fall into this bucket, let me know, reach out to me, and if you're willing to come on the next episode just to tell me how you're going through it, I would love it. But I'm with you because this one's tough. Veterans with a VA disability rating of 40% or higher and have submitted multiple applications for airman medical certificate, including an application after receiving the 70% VA rating, are not eligible to reconcile their medical records. AAM will send these cases to AGC 300 for evaluation and, if appropriate, initiation of legal enforcement action in accordance with FAA order, essentially this document, Chapter 5, Paragraph 5, A and B. According to this, you're not getting your medical back, and they might even go after you. Again, I feel for you. That I hope you're not finding yourself in that bucket. The opportunity to reconcile medical records will only be available to veterans who comply with the deadlines and disclose all reasonable known medical information on their next application and reexamination. Failure to comply and disclose all reasonably known information may result in legal enforcement action. So much for a just culture. I mean, I don't want to get into that. I'm not going to get into my opinion on this, except for one thing. They're offering amnesty to most. I think amnesty for one, amnesty for all. Okay, what's the difference between somebody receiving 60 and 70% disability? Not much. What's the difference between somebody not being factual on their first application versus their second application? Those are the two real big delineators here, right? So there's going to be an opportunity for lawyers to weigh in on this and lawsuits. So again, that's what I know. What I did was compile some of my questions to ask the FAA, and we're going to go through some of those questions right now, and hopefully it'll spur some more. I don't have answers to all these questions, but hopefully it'll spur you and potentially your attorneys to think about these and ask these questions and potentially defend your case like this. So, for number one, how did this start? Is the inception of this OIG investigation, was it limited to pilots? Hey, are we just being targeted here for some reason that I need to know about? Okay, HIPAA, I kind of asked the question. They said, no, you pretty much sign your life away. When, the example they gave me was just like you give the FAA the ability to go after your driving records. HIPAA is the same way in this regard. I initially thought that this was just for mental health issues, but clearly this is any VA disability rating. Okay, if you do have a disability rating for PTSD or any sort of mental health issues, there is another box you're going to have to check, and it doesn't always necessarily mean you're disqualified, but unfortunately you're going to have to go through the higher level of scrutiny, and it might get to deferred to Oklahoma City. We already have this pilot shortage, and now this is going to affect it even more. I want to know numbers. I asked the FAA, what are the numbers? How many pilots are in that fourth bucket? And I asked them point blank, how did you determine that fourth bucket? What's the difference, again, between 60 and 70%? They didn't give me a straight answer, but they kind of agreed with what I proposed, which was, I think it's a resources thing, is they have the ability to defend themselves against, I don't know, 100 cases, but not all 4,700 cases. So it's a manpower and resources issue is what I think. So when it comes to that, then that leaves a lot of opening for legal targeting, I believe. Somebody who has above 70%, who has been truthful and been clicking, yes, I am receiving disabilities from day one of them receiving disabilities. The answer was they should be good to go, right? So, but I am concerned about moving goalposts here. There's clearly something going on with 70% disabled, and for your knowledge, yes, there is like a paragraph about 10%, 20%, each level of disability with respect to how much you can work. If you're getting 100% VA disability, you're not supposed to be working. And but going through this process and knowing a lot of my friends, we don't think of this as in that term. We think of this as, yeah, we served our country, we've pulled 9 Gs, I've got radiation, I've got bad discs in my neck. It's kind of a thank you for your service. We hope that you continue to be healthy and continue to be a contributing member to society. Anyway, I don't want to get into the weeds on the reasons of why, because that's kind of what spurs all the negative comments in the discussion down below. So let's move on from that. Is there a way that I potentially have been targeted and not know about it? That's my scariest thing, is what if, I've received a letter, but it got, lost in the mail or thrown out with the trash. Well, it's a certified letter. I believe that you have to sign for it. So if you haven't gotten a letter by now, I think you should be fine. Don't quote me on that, but that's kind of what the FAA told me. Another question, and that's kind of scary for me to think about, is, are there any disability payment mechanisms that aren't originating from the VA that the DOT and FAA are going to be targeting? I don't know. Didn't get a clear answer from that. Here's an important one. Is there an opportunity for pilots to downgrade their VA disability rating? Going to the VA website, I saw a very clear button to click that if you want a reassessment of your disability rating to go up, yeah, there, you click here, but there wasn't one to go down. I might be mistaken upon that, but call the VA and see if you can't maybe get that rating to go down. But again, you earn that disability rating, so that's kind of a kick in the pants here. But if it means you can't fly ever again, or you can, then obviously you want to look into that option as well. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about for today. If you are in that fourth bucket, once again, I'm with you. I'm hoping for you. Fight it. Get a good lawyer. If I find some resources, I'll put them in the description there. But this was a very serious topic, and I wanted to get it out to you ASAP. I apologize it wasn't a little bit more polished and clean, and I tended to ramble. But again, I hope it's useful for you guys. I'm with you as my brothers and sisters in arms. So I'm going to leave it there. Look for a part 2 coming soon. If there is some good engagement with this video and I get good feedback that we need more data, I'll help you guys find it. But until next time, it's Steve, your Cleared Direct.